Hi, welcome to my Fiberchats. And today my guest is Steven Weber. And Steven is an amazing knitter whom I met on Instagram. And I want to start with that because I've met you exactly 46 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
You know how I
And
know
counting.
that? So yesterday, I actually remembered the post that I saw where I started talking to you. You were working on a sweater. And I was working on my very first sweater ever. And so you posted that video of you knitting this sweater. And I commented that like I could watch that forever on the loop. And I told you that I just started my first sweater. And then you respond, I have it here actually, like I have it on my phone. I'm gonna read it, right? So I said, I started my first sweater. Let's see who finishes first. And you said, good luck. Finish my first one the end of June. We'll see how this one goes. Last one was the sock yarn. This one very chunky, so I think I'll be much faster. And I said, yeah, mine is this sock yarn. I'll get back to you on my progress. And you said, well, then if we are racing, I'll definitely win. But it's not about speed, of course. Can't wait to see your finished work. And I said, we'll see about that. So that was the first conversation of ours. I mean, if I recall correctly, I actually won, but like.
Oh yeah, you definitely did. Well, the thing too, with that sweater, I don't know, the first one I had, you know what it was? It was top down. And so I was trying it on as I was going along, but the second one had to be pieced together. Right. And I found that with sweaters that I've worked on, and I haven't done that many, frankly, but when I'm piecing them together, I must have strange proportions because I'm a medium size generally, and I measure my arms and, you know, do all the measurements and whatnot. But the sleeves are always too long and I have to take them apart every time. So I don't know what that's all about, but
right.
Yeah,
well,
so I finished
actually,
that,
like,
and then
I
I had
had a few conversations with different guy knitters about that. And if you watched my interview with Hazel Tyndall, I actually asked her about that because I find that like a lot of patterns are written for women, and guys find it very difficult to fit into those patterns just because of their, you know, the shape. So it's like the women's shapes are like more tended to be more like, you know, shaped on the around the waist, and the guys need like broader shoulders, and you know, so it's, I feel like it can be frustrating at times, even when the sweaters are written specifically for men, it's still like I feel like they still rely on the patterns that written for women, and it's like the sizing can be tricky. Did you come up with a bag of tricks of how you deal with that?
No. You know, the thing is because I haven't done enough of them, I don't trust myself in the process of making it, because I twice now, 3 times now, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, this looks like it's going to be too long. And I kind of, you know, hold it against my arm and see, and like, yeah, I think it's going to be too long, but I just keep going with the pattern as is and finish it, you know, pin it together only to find out, yeah, it really is too long. So I don't know, I guess it's a matter of more experience, learning to trust my eyes when I can see something and fixing it as I go. But it's all about the learning process. But with that particular sweater you were mentioning, I think I reached a point where I knew that I had to take the sleeves apart, and I just wasn't ready to do it. So I put it down for a month or so, and that's why you won.
The naughty corner. Well, do you find, like, I find it a lot with myself because I'm a recent knitter, relatively speaking. I only started knitting 4 years ago. So I feel like with every new pattern, I learn like new bag of tricks.
Sure.
And I learn how to trust my instinct more, and how, like, if something seems to be wrong, there is a very high probability that what I'm doing is wrong, actually.
Yeah. It's really, I love, you can, like you just said, you can sense that you're developing an eye, you know, like, oh, I never would have figured out that was a mistake before. It all looked the same, but now you can see the twists and the way things, you know, blend together, fold, layout, and yeah, just maybe that's what learning is, right? It's about being able to spot mistakes.
So tell me how you got into knitting in the first place. Like, when did you start? What pushed you to try?
Mm-hmm. So it's a funny story. And I've actually been doing this now for a long time, but only really in a focused way since, well, just before the pandemic. I got back into it in like December the year before, 2019. But no, I learned in 2006, so it's been 15 years ago. And it happened because I had an accident at school, and I'm a teacher, for those who may not know, and my hand was broken. And so after a couple of surgeries to fix it and whatnot, I found out that it, it's a long story, but basically I thought that I was covered by workers' comp, and it turns out that teachers are not. So when I went to do my physical therapy, they said, "Oh no, you can't do this." And I didn't know what to do. I was young and stupid, and dealing with insurance was scary. and, um, and I could, like, I could move the hand. And I was like, I can do this myself. So I was home visiting family in Cincinnati and visiting friends. That's where I'm from originally. I live in the New York City area now. But I had a friend who has been knitting for as long as I've known her. We were friends from high school. And I said, you know what? Show me how to do that. I'm so angry and just mad at the world right now. And it's all to do with my hands. So let me learn how to do something new with my hands. And that will hopefully, I don't know, make things better. And it did, actually. I don't know if knitting is, I don't know if I recommend it for therapy after you've had hand surgery necessarily, but it did a lot for my spirit, and just, it definitely made me feel better. So that was 2006. And probably for a good 4 or 5 years after that, I was making things pretty regularly, but always very boxy things, rectangular baby blankets and scarves, and nothing that was too advanced. I just kept doing what I knew again and again, which, I guess there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you perfect the basics. But then I just put it down for no particular reason for a couple of years. And, if a cousin or somebody was having a baby, I would, try to make a baby blanket. In fact, this funny story, I did decide somewhere 10 years ago that I wanted to try something with cables, and I wanted to do a cable baby blanket for my nephew. He was born in 2011. So yeah, 10 years ago. And I didn't get it done. And then he was born, and I was like, well, I didn't get it done in time, so I'm just gonna lay this aside. And then 3 nieces were born. Another nephew was born in 2014. He's the one that ended up getting that baby blanket. So it took me 3 years to finish that. But anyway, that's the story. And then with this past year, of course, with the lockdowns and just being home, having a lot of time, it was, I don't know, I took it up again and said, let me try something new. And really, it was getting back onto Instagram. I had been on Instagram previously and had like a personal account that I just posted random personal shots. And then that got kind of boring. And but then I thought, well, let me see if I could see if there are people who knit things, and if there's a knitting community on Instagram. And lo and behold,
Right.
it certainly was. And so that's when I created that account, got tapped into all of these different designers, and in particular, seeing male designers and designs for men, because previously what I had access to were books, which were okay, nothing wrong with them, but very limited in terms of the scope of what you could do. So to see all the different sweaters and just shawls, just all these things, got me really excited to try to make some of them. And so that's been kind of the fuel for the fire, I guess.
It's funny that you mentioned the rectangular things, because when I started knitting, it was all scarves for a year. So the very first project I knitted was baby booties, but that was like the one. And then at some point, my son was like, have you ever thought about knitting something other than a rectangle? And that's what got me looking into other things. I was like, oh, maybe it's time to challenge myself. You know? But yeah, I find Instagram like very inspirational, because a lot of times like I'll finish something and I'm gonna have like zero idea of what to do next. And I'll go on Instagram to look for inspirations.
Yeah. And I've got, you know, my archive of saved projects that other people have made that I'm like, ooh, that's really cool. Right. It's hugely inspirational. And I'm really kind of like, I don't know, anti-social media in a lot of ways, but this is one area I'm like, this is good. This is a real source of something positive.
Well, talking about social media, so through the pandemic, not only you were knitting a lot, but you also singing, and you posted like some of your singing on Instagram, which I found like amazing. And like some of the people you sing with are like well-known celebrities, you know, there was Renee Fleming and whatever. How do you combine those two hobbies? Like, is there one that brings you more peace, one more important than the other, or how do you balance it?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say that one is more important than the other. I would say maybe they fulfill different needs. I mean, they're different modes of expression. And, you know, I don't know, I'm fairly involved with the arts, I guess I could say. I direct plays at my school. I teach theater. I write. And all of these different things, I don't love one more than the other. They're all really important to me. But if there's a connection between them, well, you know, actually, this is kind of funny. The way that we've rehearsed throughout the pandemic for my choir, the choir I sing with is Master Voices. For those who are interested, you can find it on Instagram, Master Voices NY.
They'll put the link under the video.
It's a fantastic choir, really dedicated people, and I've been singing with them for about 10 years. Normally, we would sing, and we're based in New York City, so we are very lucky to be able to sing in places like Carnegie Hall and really beautiful venues that are sort of known worldwide. But with this pandemic, we've rehearsed in this format via Zoom. And it's funny because you can't actually have 100 people singing all of at the same time on Zoom. There's too much lag. I'm sure everybody's been in a situation where there are a lot of people talking all at once at Zoom, and you're just like, like I can't stand it anymore. So we would have our director play the songs that we were working on, and we were all muted. We would sing along, but you can't hear anybody else, so you can't know if you're right, which is kind of the great thing about being in a choir, because you're tuning your ear to what everybody else is doing around you. And that way you blend. So you can't know if you're blending. And, but that didn't matter anyway, because we were then recording ourselves individually with different instructions for how to video, or, you know, just a setup, because the piece we were working on actually is sort of a series of about 20 different music videos. The piece is called Myths and Hymns, and it's all available on YouTube. But anyway, during the rehearsal process, since I was in my room, in my bed, actually, most of the time by myself on the computer, I would sit there and knit while we were rehearsing. And of course, eventually people started seeing that, and it became the weekly question, like, what's Stephen working on this week? And lots of jokes now about how I'm going to knit uniforms for the choir. And but it really actually opened up communication between choir members. When you're in a big group like that, you know, if we're rehearsing in person, we show up, we start singing, we have a 15-minute break. So that's the only time that you get to talk to anybody and get to know other people. And it's a large group, so you mostly just talk to the people that sit near you. And but with Zoom, we were able to show up early, chit chat, and you know, now I feel like I know my fellow choir members a lot better than I did before. So one of those strange benefits of Zoom, I suppose.
Do you find like knitting, do you knit in public like ever? Did you before the Zoom? And do you find that like breaking ice and like what makes people wanna ask you about knitting and somehow like makes them talk to you and get to know you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a conversation starter. And I've sat outside on the benches. Where I live in Hoboken, it's right along the Hudson River, and so it's nice to sit out on a pretty day. And people do stop and ask, "Oh, what is that? What are you working on? That looks really cool." I've never had anybody, you know, give me a side eye or a weird look or anything like that. I know sometimes that is a topic of conversation, but yeah, I think it's kind of fun.
Right. And do you belong to any like knitting groups in New York? Have you ever done any social aspect of knitting, like going to the fiber festivals?
Really, I have not. Well, I haven't gone to the fiber festivals.
You have to change that.
I know. Oh, believe me, I know now that I've seen what goes on and all of the cool stuff. And of course, I'm not really, I'm about an hour and a half away from Rhinebeck, so it's not.
You're coming, right, this year?
Hopefully, at least for a day. But what was I saying? Oh, community. When I first started to knit back in 2006, I would hang out at the Point in New York, which was in like the West Village. It's since closed, but it was sort of a local yarn store / cafe, and a lot of people just went there on any given night, and you could find people to sit and chat with and work with, and that was always a lot of fun. But then it closed. Then I kind of stopped knitting for a while, and then you know, at the point when I picked it back up in December of 2019, I was able to sort of get back into the local yarn scene a little bit in New York. The school that I work at is just down the street from Pearl Soho, so I can walk there in 10 minutes. And you know, I went there for a few things, but then everything locked down. So right. I have not really gotten back into doing that in person with people.
I wanted to ask you also about your school. So you mentioned to me that you opened a fiber club, right?
Yeah.
How did that happen? And like, tell me a little bit about like what kind of what was going on there? Like, what were you teaching?
Yeah, I was just about to say that's about the extent of my social knitting is my knit and crochet society, as we're calling it at school. So I share with my students all of the kooky different things that I am involved in, and just because I want them to see that you can do all these different things with your life, you know, be involved in a lot of different arts all at once. And so when I showed them that I was working on, I don't know what it was at the time, a shawl, I think, that, you know, prompted a couple of students to say, oh, well, you know, I know how to crochet, or I know how to knit, we should have a club. And it was really student driven. In fact, one student in particular, she kept nagging me about it, and until I finally said, yeah, okay, we're gonna do this. But there was a strong desire, and it was really cool that there was such a strong desire. And at first, I didn't know how directed it should be. Like, at first, I tried to teach them techniques because most of them came knowing something. At least the basics, and there were a couple that knew nothing, and there were about 8 students in all at first, and I didn't know what to do, so I I sent a message to Louis Boria, Brooklyn Boy Knits, and asked him, like, what do you do? I've seen that you teach and you've worked in the schools, like, how do you? And so he gave me some tips about the cameras to get, and just sort of the ways to get them started, and so I did that, and I had to, you know, a Hue camera, but sitting in your bed and trying to work a camera and trying to get your hands underneath the camera, it was difficult. I didn't have a proper workspace to do that.
Right.
And as it turns out, most of them were happy kind of just doing what they knew. They wanted to just sit and talk and work on projects. And so it became just a social hour where we, you know, had a little knitting bee. Right. A weekly Friday afternoon, sort of end of the week, chill out and relax. And it was great. I loved it. And I'm really looking forward to continuing that when we're back in school in person next year. And hopefully in person, I'll be able to teach a little more, you know, for those who are starting at zero. I think that'll be fun.
And do you know how to crochet as well? Do you crochet?
I don't. My grandmother tried to teach me, and I could do it while she was watching me, but it hasn't clicked in my head yet. So I want to. I've seen some really cool things that people have done. I'm really interested in like Tunisian crochet in particular. That looks really beautiful and kind of refined.
Well, you know, I interviewed Padma R, and she is the
mm-hmm.
Tunisian crochet designer. So if you want, she might give you some tips there
Okay.
how to start.
Yeah,
She's a good source.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I saw it first. Detroit Knots is her name. I don't know anybody's real names in real life, but that's their name on Instagram. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of your pictures on Instagram. So a lot of them have an open bottle of wine and a glass of wine sitting next to it. Is there like a story behind it?
A story beyond the fact that I like wine? Not necessarily, except that I think it's fun to kind of mix and match art forms, as I said, and wine is definitely an art. I kind of approach wine the same way that I've started to approach yarns and knitting. I like learning about the history of the craft. I like learning about the people who make the wines, the people who raise the sheep, the people who spin the yarn. I'm really interested in the process of everything leading up to it. And that point where I get to drink the wine and knit the yarn all at once, usually with some nice music playing in the background. It's just kind of blissful.
Did that ever cause any problems?
What's that?
Did the wine and with the knitting combined with the knitting?
No. I wish I could say there were, but I probably have such a high tolerance at this point. That's what the lockdowns have done to me.
Right.
But
tell me a little bit about your writing career. So I've read whatever posts you posted that link to Instagram, and you were talking about Stephen West. And if Stephen West ever listens to this interview by mistake, I'd love to have him on. I'm hoping, like, if I'll say that often enough, he'll hear it one day and he'll come and
send him a note. I bet he would. He seems very friendly.
Please send him a note on my behalf. Yeah. But like, how do you come up with the material that you write about? What's your inspirations? And I know that you mentioned that you're thinking about writing a book. How's that been going? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, good question. The funny thing, the post that you mentioned about Stephen West, right. I wrote that because a colleague of mine who does crochet, and she does some beautiful work. She says, "Oh, I thought when I saw on Instagram that you were posting about Stephen West, that was like your alternate identity, because I'm Stephen Weber." Like, no, that's just a coincidence.
Well, actually, you're gonna find it funny, but when I posted the announcement for our Fiberchat, Ronnie from Inspired Fiberworks was like, "Oh my God, I thought it was Stephen West you interviewing."
Oh God, what a disappointment. What a letdown.
No, I'm
just
sure.
Me, I'm sorry.
I'm not disappointed.
Well, thank you. No, so writing, I thank you for mentioning my writing career. There's no real career to speak of other than I like to write, and I'm part of a writing group, the Jersey City Writers. And I've written drafts of a few novels. They've been workshopped and they've gotten good press, but they're kind of like those sweaters that I know that I have to fix before I can wear them, and they're sitting in a closet somewhere. Yeah, they're waiting. They're ripening. That's what it is. Their moment is coming. But I tend to I mostly write longer fiction. I have not mastered sort of the short story or found a way to say what I need to say in so few words. But I guess my mind thinks towards bigger projects, and I like things that touch on history, but also mix history and the present moment in a certain funky, fun way. For example, one of the things that I wrote was a book about the historical reenactment societies around Napoleon. And this is based on an article that I read back in 2015 when they were doing like the 200-year anniversary of Waterloo. There was an argument over who should play Napoleon when they do these celebratory reenactments. And there were two contenders. One was French and one was American. And it's like, oh God, that's crazy. This should be a fight, but what a fun fight. so things like that, where I can do a lot of historical research, but bring it into the present or tie it to the present and have some fun with it. So I don't necessarily write realistic historical fiction. I wrote another book was set in ancient Egypt, but it has elements of fantasy in it. And yeah, another story was set in Ohio, where I'm from, and that was more about a girl in the present who learns some dark family secrets, and the history of the region becomes part of that story. So yeah, I like history, and I like giving it a twist.
Right. And then you also mentioned that you are thinking about getting into the knitwear design. Mm-hmm. What do you think? And because I've been asked by like a few people when I'm going to start designing, mm-hmm. because I've knitted, I've tested, and people will be like, so are you coming up with something, right?
Yeah.
What's your, what do you think stopping you at this moment from designing? And what do you think the push that you need to start designing? And if you were to start designing, what do you think you're gonna design as your first project?
What I've had in mind were a few different sweaters that are inspired by the different cities that I've lived and loved. And so just I've spent some time already thinking about color palettes and ways to express what those places feel like to me or what they mean to me without being too exact. Like I don't want to paint a picture or draw a picture with yarn. I want, you know, the colors and the textures to feel like the place. And so just playing around with that, I had started to, I mean, I went and bought graph paper and pencils and you know, started to play with this. The next step though, I think is like, well, I've got to get the yarns. And then that feels like such a big investment, you know, because one particular, the piece that I've been working on is, so I lived for a year in Bath, England, and I love it there. I go back.
That place, my God,
yeah.
love that place.
I do too, and I go back frequently, every couple of years. And anyway, so I've been playing with the colors and whatnot. I'm like, well, like I've got to get the yarn from Bath, but that is out of the question. You know, it's like, I've looked at the different shops there and try to find the right things. I haven't ordered anything yet, but I've just done some research to what's available. So then it's the investment of the money and then sitting, playing around. But I guess I have a little bit of fear of, well, what if it's crap? Of course, you don't know that until you try it, and you have to experiment and play. But I don't have that much experience of experimenting with yarn and fiber crafts. I've done everything by patterns up to this point. Right. So I think it's just a matter of perhaps trusting myself a little bit more and, you know, just having fun with it and seeing what happens. Probably before doing the actual sweater, I could see myself developing the stitch patterns and perhaps doing a shawl or something that would involve the same process, but not the same form.
So talking about shawls, you just finished or you're finishing Stephen West shawl, right?
I am, yeah, finishing. I'm pretty close. I brought, I have a pile of everything I've ever worked on here. So in case you were to ask me.
You want to see that pile.
I shouldn't say not everything I've ever worked on, but everything that I've made and still have, because a lot of things I've given away as gifts.
Right.
Yeah, this is the Painting Honeycomb shawl. Oh, it's turning up. The colors look good. Whenever I take pictures of it and post about it, it doesn't look right. But this is pretty much what it looks like. And what I've done with this one that I've kind of enjoyed is I'm using two cakes of the same yarn, and it's an ombre yarn, but I've started the honeycomb with the dark end and the honey with the light end. And as it's going on, they progressively swap spaces. And I'm really pleased with the way it's turning out. I'm making this for a friend.
Well, I mean, you know that I'm obsessed with everything blue. So to me, this is just like a masterpiece, museum worthy.
Yeah. And it's fun too. I spend, this piece in particular, I spend so much time working on it, and then I just lay it out and I can stare at it for 10, 20 minutes, you know, just the colors play with your eyes. And as you move around, it seems, I don't know, it's sparkly. There's nothing like sparkling in it, but the way that the colors mix, I've never really experienced that as much with other things, but I love staring at this piece.
Right. Right. No, it's beautiful. I love the colors of it.
Yeah, thank
you.
you.
So what else do you have in that pile? Show us something else.
Let's see. Here's another. Actually, I've got three. This has been my year of Stephen West shawls because I never had done any of his until the hybrid knit along, which started in December.
Right.
And of course, I'd seen so many things posted by different people, and especially with the knit alongs that he's done in the past. And I thought, like fun. I want to get involved with that. So I vowed to do the next one, which at that point was the hybrid knit along. And I said, no matter what, I'm going to do it. I got the kit before they all sold out. And I was blown away by that. Actually, I'll show you that one first, because this is the one that I've been wearing all winter long. And this is the woven chevrons. And yeah, I love it. And this one is the painting waves.
I want to do that one.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I think the pattern calls for, oh wait, I showed you the wrong side. The pattern calls for 8 color shifts,
right?
But I did it with 10 simply because the yarns that I got came in mini skeins of 5. So,
right.
And I couldn't decide on 2 to take out, so I just put them all in.
I love his patterns because I feel like he has this thing where he puts like a little unknown to me technique in each one of them. So each one is fun for different reasons. And I feel like I'm learning some new like little trick. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like something major, right?
Yeah.
But the way he does something, like I did the Starflake, and that was like just the construction of it. My mind was blown, like just purely from like engineering point of view, right? I was like, oh, I didn't know you can even do that thing, you know? It's like every pattern of his has something like that. I always feel like it wasn't wasted. It wasn't just knitting. It was a learning experience along the way, you know?
Yeah, it's like a lesson in architecture.
Right.
It's really cool.
And they all have, you can tell it's his shawl, because they all have that like signature look, but they're also different at the same time. And I also find it like very interesting how you'll go on Ravelry and you see like 400 people made the same shawl and not one of them looks the same. Like they're all different just because of the colors, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so much fun to scroll through and see what everybody's done differently. And then of course the challenge is, okay, well, what am I going to do differently?
Right. What would you say was your most challenging project today?
My For Fox's Sake sweater, which as you can see is still missing a sleeve, but it's got one done. But so this was the first time I did anything with color work, and it turned out well for the most part.
It's Max the Knitter.
Yeah, Max the Knitter. And I love the sweater, and I looked at so many different versions of it online that people had done. But because it was my first color work, and you know, I'd done my research, I'd read about tension, I read about all the things you got to look out for on the you know, the inside here.
Right.
And despite all of that, I think because it was more than just 2 colors. There are a number of places where you're floating, you know, 2 or 3 at a time. It's a little lumpy. I mean, I think I can still wear it, and I will, and I'm looking forward to it. But, you know, I can see that it's not the smooth sort of thing that I want it to be.
You know what? I think like once you block it, it might take care of it actually, because I
blocked the yoke, and it it was better than it was, but it's still a little chunky.
No, I'm also like, I feel like I just started recently, like probably just a year ago, to do the color work. And my first one, like I'm looking now at it, and it was like such a hot mess. Like it was total disaster. Like there are like some stitches that like an inch long and some stitches that like super tight. So it's like I came a long way from that project, and I'm actually tempted because the yarn was like super expensive cashmere, and I'm tempted to just like frog it and redo it just because it's like I love the hat, but it's like the execution wasn't the best.
No, so it was definitely a learning project, and I will know moving forward just how to better gauge myself and my attention.
I'm actually a big fan of his designs, and I bought yarn to do the alpaca sweater, with the alpaca right on the middle, but it's in tarsi, and I'm terrified of it for some reason, so I have to like find this brave moment and like try it.
It's interesting too, figuring out when is the right moment for the different projects that you want to do, because like you said, we have this list of so many things, but I don't know, they find you when you're ready, I suppose.
Talking about that, right? So how far ahead do you plan? Like, do you have projects planned in your head already? Like, after I'm done with this shawl, I'm gonna do this and this and this, or you like finish one and then wait for the inspiration to hit you? How does it usually work?
Well, so I still have to finish the fox sweater. Hold on, trying to grab. This sweater is the Atlas sweater by Josh Bennett, and I really, really love the look and feel of it. But this is one where the sleeves are just way too long, so I got to take them apart and restart. By the way, this yarn came from Josh Stein at Blue Fiber, who you interviewed.
Love that guy.
He's wonderful, and he's wonderful to work with. He's probably asking, where did that yarn go? You haven't shown the world this beautiful sweater. It's because it's not finished, but working with him, it was the first time that I'd ever sort of communicated with a dyer and worked to get exactly the color that I wanted. And he did it like this was exactly the color. And that was a fun process. And
well, he's a brilliant dyer. Like, I really like
and so much fun to work with and easy to work with. So definitely check him out. But anyway, so after I finish the shawl, I've got to finish these sweaters. I have a pair of socks that I'm still working on. And after that, I have, I've been getting interested in just like I like historical writing, sort of the history of knitting and all these patterns from the past that have kind of disappeared or shifted and changed. And you probably know this, there's the one painting of King Edward the Seventh, seventh, eighth, I don't know, 1920s, wearing his Fair Isle sweater, and it kind of started the Fair Isle craze at that time. And I love that sweater. I'm like, ooh, I got to find that pattern. If I can't find it, then I've got to make it. But there are a lot of different sort of variations and versions of it. So I want to try one of those. So that might be my next color work piece.
It's funny because like my next project is, so I've been working with Monique Boomstra, who is a passion for lace on Instagram. And she just designed a piece. It's a square Shetland lace shawl that she was inspired by a piece in the museum and some Shetland archives. So it's like a mixture of different designs. And it's the largest shawl I ever attempted.
Wow.
It's the thinnest yarn I've ever touched.
Oh wow! And you've done some thin yarns. I've seen.
Yeah, not and that like I looked at, you know what?
Oh my God! It's like spider web.
It's like seriously. So it's actually 4,000 meters per 100 grams. And it's going to be on 1.75 millimeter needles. So that might just either kill me or take me forever. I don't know, like one of those two. But it's just like, I find it so inspiring that it's a museum piece that I'm recreating, you know?
Yeah, I have another one similar to that. What was I listening to? Like I said, I've been listening to a lot of like knitting, yarn, wool, sheep history books and reading them. It was the Brief History of the World According to Sheep. I posted about it on Instagram. I think that's the title. Sally Coulthard. Anyway, she mentions in it that one of the oldest surviving pieces of knitwear is the remnant of a sock that comes from...
I actually saw it in England. It's in the
Did you at the Victoria and Albert Museum?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what she said. Well, it was where it was. So I looked it up and I was amazed because that pattern, I mean, it looks pretty modern. I mean, you'd see that done around here these days. So I was kind of fascinated with that. And I thought, ooh, I would like to sort of revive that pattern and do something with it. I haven't seen if it's written up anywhere. I mean, I did look around and I thought somebody must have, created a modern pattern for this at some point. Maybe they have, but I haven't found it. So
it's funny because sometimes like the most, like what would seem most obvious things to recreate has not been recreated. So you might be the pioneer in that actually.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that either.
I was thinking it might be fun to do something along those lines with natural yarns that haven't been dyed, but different colored wool. I don't know, but so yeah, that's a project that's in my head, and I don't even know what I would do with that pattern, if that would be a sweater or what, probably a sweater, but.
Right. Well, I'd loved getting knowing you better, and I'm sure everybody else did as well.
Likewise. This has been a lot of fun.
Right, and I can't wait to see what you're gonna design. I'll test for you if you ever need to.
Thank you. Yeah, I will definitely need some very sympathetic testers.
Oh, I'm that. It's funny because I've test knitted like during the quarantine. I think I did 12 test knits like last year alone.
Oh wow!
It's like that was like all I did. I didn't do basically anything that I couldn't even find inspiration. I don't know. It's like last year was strange because I could like usually I'm very avid reader and I couldn't read anything. I could only listen to audiobooks for some reason. Which before that, like I wouldn't even touch audiobooks. I was like so snobbish about it. It had to be the real book, right?
I'm exactly the same.
And I also like I didn't have any sort of like inspirations as far as knitting goes. So I was just open to every test knit. But I learned so much from test knits because it's like you see how the brain of the designer works, which is like fascinating. Like they're also different, the way they write, the way they like it's all, you think it's all yarn and needles, but it's like it's so different, and like you learn so much just from testing. And the thing is that first thing I learned that every pattern I ever tested had some sort of mistake in it. Some mistakes were like set back for months or two. Some mistakes were like minor and could be fixed within like, a comma missing or whatever. But like there were a few major mistakes with very experienced designers. So you just have to like be kind to yourself and allow yourself to make mistakes, because it's like this is what testing of the patterns is for,
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's the same with the writing process. You write it, you give it to your readers, you see what they think, and make amends.
Right. Well, I'm there for you when you need it.
Perfect. And likewise, let me know when you need someone too.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for being a guest of my Fiberchats.
Thank you.
I'll post it, and I'll post all your information under the video so people can follow you on Instagram and hear you sing and and read some of your stories.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure.